It was like a light bulb moment early on where we're like, wait a second, this might be the only chance ever to actually do Darth Jar Jar.
Hi, my name is Andres Cabrera from Geeks of Color. It's a pleasure to meet you guys.
So nice to meet
You
you.
too.
Yeah, so Dan and Benji, I wanted to ask about Rebuild the Galaxy. This is one giant love letter to Star Wars, but how did you guys go about finding the balance of properly celebrating each trilogy within the Skywalker saga?
It was a long process of winnowing down to what we wound up with. I mean, at first, when we first started writing this thing, we wanted to get every character, every ship, every planet, everything, every creature that we possibly could because we're just such massive Star Wars and Lego Star Wars fans. But, we only had 4 22-minute episodes.
Yeah, they had to tell us to stop at a
So
certain
we
point.
couldn't squeeze it all in. What ended up happening is we kind of had to focus in on the things that best served the story that we were trying to tell. Like, we never really said, like, we need this percentage from the original trilogy, this percent from the sequel, this percent from the prequel. Like, we love all of it. And so it was just it was all essentially in the bin of Lego that we dumped on the ground and started playing with. But what we really wanted to do was to find things that really connect with the journey that our main characters are on and could help them on that journey.
We had access to the entire swath of Star Wars history, so we did feel like we wanted to represent as much as we could in this, because I do think that it's meaningful to see things that, we grew up with the original trilogy, but there's a lot of people whose first exposure to Star Wars was the prequels, and there's a lot of people whose first exposure was the sequels or the Clone Wars or whatever it might have been. So we did also want to do enough that people say, I feel like I'm seeing the thing that I love on screen, and then figuring out organic ways to make it make sense with the bigger story that was being told.
As a fan of all three, I definitely appreciate it. I love seeing all these characters be in there. So I think you guys nailed it with that. So the twists and turns of certain characters, the new versions of these characters is one of the most fun aspects of the series. What was the process like coming up with that? And how did you guys officially decide on these new versions?
It was, there were some that, were some that preceded us, like in terms of idea, like Darth Jar Jar, for instance, has been a fan theory for years and years and years. And, as fans would talk about it. And, it's just a fun thought experiment. But when we found ourselves writing this and rebuilding the galaxy, it was like a light bulb moment early on where we're like, wait a second, this might be the only chance ever to actually do Darth Jar Jar. And so something like that was like very quick and easy to know we wanted to do that. Other characters would be like, we know we want to have a villain that turns out to be good. Like, who would be the best one to fit in here? Like, it was just a slow process of like what fit each moment.
As much as possible, we tried to make it built out of the story that was being told, and not just make it a series of memes or a series of, oh, I recognize that, because there is a certain satisfaction in that, and we certainly have a couple moments that are just for fun and funny stuff. But for any of the new mixed up characters that we introduced that played a bigger part in the story, we really had to figure out where they fit within this rebuilt galaxy, their function, and by figuring out sort of the underpinnings of who they are in this version of the galaxy, it made it easier to write.
Yeah, well, that's something that, like, it's not even necessarily apparent when you're watching it. But in the writing and creating process of this, we really wanted to make sure that any twist that we did to a character had like an in-universe explanation for like why this happened. Like, we sort of viewed it as all of these characters are still, there's something in their heart that is still the same character, but life presented a different path for them. Like someone who was good in the original trilogy maybe had an encounter with something that sent them down a dark path. Or maybe what if someone who was evil or a Sith in the originals had a different life that led them to a moment where they could make a better decision. We sort of had this thought process in the back of our mind, which I think it helps it to not feel quite so random. We didn't want it to just be like, well, what are they doing? Like, it still needed to feel like Star Wars, even though we're mashing everything up and turning everything on its head. It still needed to feel like an authentic Star Wars story. And so we wanted to ground things as much as possible.
Now, speaking of the story of Dev and Sig, I'm curious, what was the process like as far as building the brother-brother relationship? Because I don't know if we've seen something like this specifically in Star Wars when it comes to light side and dark side, and then obviously including the classic themes and tropes that we're used to seeing within a Star Wars story.
Well, thank you for asking about that, because to us, that is the absolutely most critical element of the whole show, is that brother relationship. And it was one that we really refined over time. But what we did know from the beginning is that we wanted to start on a sleepy planet of nerf herders and see nerf herders for the first time on screen, which seems crazy, but it's true that this is the first time we were actually seeing scruffy looking nerf herders. So we knew that we wanted to start there. And we also knew that one of the things that really excites us as writers is writing about the nature of the Force, the light side, the dark side. Are you beyond redemption? Is anyone beyond redemption? These are the big questions of Star Wars. And so we said, well, it's not enough just to say, in our world, Rey is good. In this world, she's a Sith. That's shocking in and of its own right, but it's not personal to our main character in quite the same way. And so we said, well, the only way that it could really be personal is if that you went from a galaxy where there was someone that you loved, in this case, your brother, who you look up to, who you admire, who in any other version of this story probably would be the hero of this story. And now things are changed through your own inadvertent actions. And now the best person in the galaxy is the worst person in the galaxy. What do you do? How do you solve that problem? How do you even begin to unravel that problem? Is there a point where you accept that this person who looks and sounds like your brother is not your brother and is irredeemable? Or do you continue to fight against that and say, I know that there's a part of that person I love still in them? Because we rebuilt the galaxy in a very literal way, we could see both sides of that build.
I would also say, on a sort of meta level, we also wanted to play with the idea of, like, this is a Lego thing, and so much of your childhood Lego playing is with your sibling, and like there is the different ways to play. Like, there's one kid who loves to build something, there's a kid who loves to break it, and smash it. And so we sort of have that then thrown into this Star Wars story of the building versus breaking. But at the end of the day, it is like that sibling bond that we wanted to play with. Yeah.
I felt that personally as someone with an older brother and who played Legos with my older brother and watched all the Star Wars trilogies with my older brother, even the recent sequels that we love. I definitely appreciate it. So thank you so much, guys. I think you guys absolutely nailed this. It's absolutely hilarious, and I really, really enjoyed it. So as a fellow Star Wars fan, I appreciate what you guys did.
Thank you so much. We
It
really
means a
appreciate it.
lot.